Hello and welcome to the Dungeon Masters Guild House, a weekly podcast where I, your host, Matthew Whitby, sit down with creators all across the Dungeon Masters Guild and surrounding space. And I'm joined by potentially maybe the most qualified, Zeke Gonzalez. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh God, just threw me under the bus. Hi. Most qualified Lord.
I guess maybe sorry, I mean most academically or scientifically qualified. Would that like? I don't know.
Sure.
I might
take it.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
I haven't done like an audit of like everyone else to check their qualifications, saying, oh no, this person's. I'm just going to stick with it. Let's run with it.
I'll accept it.
Yeah. No. Well, okay. Well, I guess going from that then, with that sort of introduction, what sort of products are you known for on the DMsGuild?
Well, you slid right into it. So I guess the sort of things I'm the best known for are probably monsters. I'm very much a monster designer at heart. That's the first thing I kind of fell into as a homebrewer and what I wanted to share with the community. So that's what I'm best known for. But even more than that, probably is I'm a scientist, like you alluded to, working on my PhD. And so what I love to do is take some of these really weird, fascinating things that monsters, that animals or organisms that actually live alongside us on Earth can do, and translating that to fantasy and making weird sort of scientifically inspired creations. And so that's sort of what I'm known for, probably like my field guide series, which are small bestiaries, 10 monsters each based on science, and then the scientific secrets projects, which are sort of supplemental bestiaries for the card back campaigns that have been coming out recently.
And then I imagine, well, with these sort of scientific secrets, you've kind of been doing them as a collaboration and getting a bunch of sort of amazing creators and all that involved.
Yes, which has been awesome. When I first came up with the idea, I was like, okay, I've been making stuff on the Guild for a little more than a year, and I feel like I've been seeing a lot of the same names, and so I wanted to sort of expand my circle a little bit and try to reach out to people who maybe haven't had a chance to put something out on the Guild yet, or people who have only put out 1 or 2 projects. And I really tried to pull in a lot of like newer faces or people that I could maybe help give a little bit of a push, just create 1 monster. It's so easy, just, I'll help you edit it and we can work together. And that's one of my favorite things about those projects, is like getting to work with so many great people and come up with all sorts of wild stuff that I would never have thought of.
So I guess I kind of have like 2 questions. I'm going to go down the sort of like the scientific angle first, because obviously, so I've spoken to a good number of people who kind of take inspiration from their day-to-day life and just kind of sort of imbue it with their. What was like? Can you sort of remember like what was the first moment when like in your just day-to-day life where you're like, this would make a good D&D monster?
Actually, I think like that sort of inspiration first came when I wanted to start DMing in 2017 to out myself as a baby. And I was reading through the what is it called? The Dungeon Master's free rules, or the basic rules on Wizards of the Coast website, because I hadn't bought any books yet. And I was reading through some of the monsters, and there was, stuff like the Remorhaz is like this centipede monster that lives in the Arctic and all this stuff. And I was like, at the time, I was like learning about millipedes and centipedes. I had to learn how to identify them, learn about a lot of their like really unique and interesting features. And I was like, this thing could really use a little bit of an upgrade to bring it in line with some of the nasty centipedes that have these like really venomous bites that can cause inflammation, make it really hard to move. It can be excruciatingly painful. And so when I ran a Remorhaz the first time, I was like, you know what? While you're poisoned by this, you have disadvantage on dexterity saving throws because your joints are swelling up. It's hard for you to move. And so that's sort of where that came from. And then I guess it became a little bit more explicit as I started to create content and not just sort of running my own games.
No, I guess I'm curious as well. So what, like, if you don't mind saying, so what is your PhD exactly? Like, I'm curious about like which like part of like biology, or like is that
Yeah, I actually had a very interesting sort of track. I'm working on a biology PhD. Hopefully, cross your fingers for me. And I started out studying, I knew I wanted to study sexual selection, which is basically a form of evolution that happens based on animal reproduction, animal reproductive behavior that's sort of deeply entwined with that. And I wanted to study the first lab that I was working in. I was studying daddy long leg penis morphology. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say that once I've said that out loud.
No,
okay.
Anything flies here. This is great.
Perfect. So yeah, I studied daddy long leg penis morphology for a year, just dissecting out daddy long leg penises, trying to get a grasp for how all of the different sizes and morphologies that the penises had affected the way that the males and the females interacted with each other. I started to unpackage what I think might be this really interesting case where the females, if the males did not give them a large enough gift, the males will go up to females and give them like a little prey item, like a fly or something wrapped up, to say like, here, while you eat, if you are satisfied with this, then maybe we can copulate. Yeah. And this is in some daddy long leg species, and the female will accept it. And then basically while she's busy, while she's eating, they'll copulate, and then the male will leave. Yeah. But I found this really interesting case where the females appeared to be grabbing the males and preventing them from escaping. And as I was dissecting some of the species, I found male penises inside of female operculums. And so I was starting to look at like, are the females like snapping off the male penises if they're not like satisfied or whatever? So there was this whole very interesting aspect that I was investigating. And then I end up shifting completely. And now I study fish vision, color vision in fish, in these beautiful East African cichlids that live in these very clear waters where being able to see and identify each other is really important to try to mate.
Sorry, as a tangent, in terms of like shifting topics for a PhD, I think that's one of the most drastic.
Yeah, it sounds really dramatic, right? Yeah. And it's like, you know, when I tell people I used to study daddy long legs which are an arthropod, a lot like, you know, spiders or centipedes or a lot of the insects we think about. And then I tell them that I switched to study fish. People are like, wow, that's such a dramatic shift. But in science and in biology, a lot of times switching model organism, which is what we call like the animal we study is our model organism, switching between those obviously makes a big difference, but it doesn't make nearly as much of a difference as like what you're studying overall. So like I'm still studying sexual selection, so a lot of what I know and what I learn is still super applicable. But if I had switched around and started studying like the biochemistry of soil, that would be like, people would be like, what is Zeke doing? This is all over the place. This is some type of situation. So I don't remember what the original question was, but no, that's what I'm thinking now.
I guess it's fascinating. I can't help but imagine. I don't know if daddy long legs as a whole, I don't know if they necessarily translate well to a D&D monster, especially again penis morphology as a combination of two words. I'm not comfortable with like these sort of imagery that sort of evokes.
No, I'm not telling you to throw giant daddy long leg penises at your players. I don't think that would end well for anyone involved.
But then, I guess to link it to the question then. So what was like the first fact you heard about animals as a whole that you thought like, or just like insects or anything that you thought this should be. So aside from the sort of the venom in a centipede. Was there one that really stood out, like just like, this has to be a monster? I have to make this a monster.
I think it actually sort of was the other way around, because I got an undergrad degree in biology, another one in psychology. I worked at a wetland sanctuary for a year, like actually interacting with animals. And so I knew a lot about animals when I first started to play D&D. And so it actually normally would come around the other way, where I would, you know, read a monster and then be like, if this monster is really supposed to be like a fantasy analog to this animal, then it could probably also do this. And that would probably make this a lot more interesting than a bag of hit points with a nasty bite attack.
Yeah.
So that's the sort of direction I went. But if you want an example from recently, I relatively recently this year was trying to come up with a monster for Scientific Secrets of Avernus. And I found out that petrels, this group of birds, they will puke their stomach oil onto other animals that attack them, especially other birds. And if it gets matted in the feathers of other birds that are like trying to steal prey from them or attack their nest or whatever the case might be, it can actually keep them from flying.
Because they're very sort of sensitive when it comes to sort of their wings and stuff, aren't they?
Yeah, and if their wings get all matted in this really sticky, dense, like stomach acid, it makes it really hard for them to escape or to do whatever they were doing. And so I turned that into a projectile vomit, recharge ability, breath weapon, you could say.
As I say, for awareness, I think that's part of the course. Like anything gross or just like anything hellish, I think things that throwing up on you is not really the nicest experience.
So appropriate. Like the last thing you want is puke on you. So if you're going to Avernus, you get puke on you. Like that's how it's gonna go.
It's fascinating the way that you mentioned it, that it kind of works both ways in taking like, you know, animals and then sort of again applying them in like turning them into D&D monsters, and then also to take existing D&D monsters and enhance them or improve them or somehow make them more accurate. It feels like you kind of have like a good amount of like versatility when it comes to creating monsters. And that leans into my next question. I had two questions. I remember. I've remembered it. So what is it about monsters that kind of like drew you to that particular style, that particular brand of design?
Oh man, I don't know. We could probably, you know, like dig deep into my psyche and be like, as a child, I wandered the horror aisle of blockbusters just looking at the covers because I couldn't check them out because I had 3 younger siblings. But, you know, I just think I've always really been fascinated by monster design. I love horror movies. I especially love creature features and old kaiju films. And when it comes to storytelling and D&D and all these other great RPGs where we can craft stories with our friends, something that I am personally interested in injecting into the story are weird and unusual monsters. And so I guess that's just where my brain goes first. I've definitely written some adventures, but I think really my bread and butter, and honestly, if I'm trying to like crank something out really fast, then it's going to be monsters.
Is it actually, so what is it, on the adventure front, was it, you had is it the Pretty Little Liches series of adventures?
Yeah.
And so was that for a, or was it, I need to double check as well, because that wasn't a adventure, sort of like community content thing, or was it?
Yeah, it's a trilogy of tier 4 adventures, actually.
Oh, of course.
And the first one even has a pretty heavy science slant to it too. The Greenhouse of Nightmares is about the party. You know, there's any number of adventure hooks, but essentially it's it's set in a swamp where the like pollution and trash and like sort of this climate change analog in the fantasy setting is degrading this habitat, and this Medusa Lich, who has lived there for a really long time, is sick of it. And she says, you know, if these humanoids are going to act like parasites, I'm going to turn them into parasites. And she starts kidnapping humanoids and transforming them into like bug monsters, basically. So that adventure is filled with nasty, creepy crawlies and this great Medusa Lich trying to fight climate change in her own special way.
Yeah. I was going to say, when it comes to like adventure writing, like diving in or like start like writing things for tier 3 and tier 4, is that where you kind of started with writing adventures?
Oh no.
God,
no.
I was like, because that's brave. I gotta admire that.
Yeah, my first adventure was, I think, tier 2, Winter's Breath, that I wrote, and then JBC Perry produced.
Yes.
That is, you know, we're stepbrothers through
Yep.
JBC Perry presents. And then I wrote some tier 1 and tier 2 adventures, and I just skipped their tier 3 entirely when my party of the campaign that I've been running since 2017, they're level 20 now, but when they first hit level 16, I really struggled to come up with ways to challenge them. And so writing the Pretty Little Liches adventures were sort of my way of finding fun ways to challenge basically godlike PCs.
Yeah. I suppose you kind of turn the focus away of like, it's not necessarily threats to them anymore. It's kind of threats that they have to deal with. So it's kind of it's like trying to think of like you raise the stakes, but it's always the case of like, okay, well you are in some danger, but it's ultimately, you know, trying to save the world because you're that strong at that point.
Right, exactly. Anyone who has a 9th level spell, the whole situation, it's, you know, it's been flipped, flopped, and fucked. It's just off in its own corner. But when the threat that they're trying to mitigate affects something that they care about, civilization they care about, NPCs they care about, etc. That's where you can really crank that dial in some of those higher tiers and really make those threats really challenging.
Yeah, no, I can sort. Again, I can only sort of imagine. I think, I think I definitely want to try and dip in and have like a few more sort of like level 21 shots. I just
Oh, you
run for
should.
buys.
It's so much fun. You absolutely should give it a roll.
I think was it the Planet of the Tarrasques seemed like a good sort of like maybe introduction.
Yes, Planet of the Tarrasques is a great example of a way to like challenge Gonzo level 20 characters. I also really recommend The Fires of Ickish by the Arcane Library. It's level 20 adventure. It's a lot of fun, and a lot of people read it the first time through, and it's super gorgeously well presented. And a lot of people read it through, and they're like, this doesn't feel too crazy. And it's because she did a brilliant job of taking sort of a lot of not necessarily ordinary, but sort of what a lot of people conceptualize as like lower level threats and elevating them to a level that can challenge those higher level PCs. So that's also, if you're looking for something tier 4 to run that's not one of mine, that's a really fun one.
Yeah, well, obviously there's the underlying of like, oh yeah, obviously you should get the pretty low. But in case you wanted to like diversify and reach out a little bit.
Spread the love.
Yeah,
you got the whole DMsGuild there. Like, check it out.
There's I wouldn't. I just what is it? Going on the website and looking at like tier 4 stuff. I haven't actually browsed that ever before, but I think you'd probably find some dope stuff.
There's some gnarly stuff in there. Yeah. It's fantastic.
So I guess so to bring it back around to you and your creative process as a whole, then. I imagine it, especially when it comes to like a series. So obviously the scientific secrets of Saltmarsh or Avernus, it's kind of very much like, okay, you go to that location, you do your research. But outside of those products, like where do your ideas come from? Like we have, I guess we have kind of like touched on it a little bit, but I'm just like curious about like, what's the process for you?
Yeah, totally. So especially, I think I sort of made a transition about halfway through my career, my life as a content creator for the DMsGuild, where the first half of the time I basically was just converting stuff that I ran for my home group. That 3-year campaign, we call ourselves Dungeons and Turtles. Because we're all alumni of a school with the mascot as a turtle.
Okay, I was expecting like a full turtle party or something.
Oh, there have been a lot of jokes about next campaign we all have to play turtles. But so the first sort of half of my career, I would just I converted the adventures that I ran for them.
Mm-hmm.
I would compile the monsters that I created for them and for the world that was set in, and I would just polish them up, put them through, at first homebrewery and then later with my layout designer, and we would publish those to the DMsGuild. And then after about a year of doing that, I was like, I want to try to create something like new, like just for the guild. And that was where Pretty Little Liches was born from. And since then, a lot of that inspiration is very much sort of like shower thoughts. And I also have something I call my inspiration journal, which is basically a combination of a dream diary where after I wake up, I write down my dreams. I write down ideas from video games, lines from books, quotes from podcasts, anything that is interesting to me, feels poetic or inspiring, I'll write down in that book. And then whenever I sit down and I want to write something up, I'll flip through that inspiration notebook and be like, oh, I had this dream about like this horrible monster in a dark castle. And so that dream turned into the finale of the Pretty Little Liches adventures, for example. So
yeah, no, I must say, the idea of like, I guess my shower thoughts just all go into like a text document on my phone. But the idea of actually like there, there's so many times where like I'm engaging with a piece of medium and there's just a line that just hits differently. Or just like there's something about it, just go like, I don't know what it is, but I really connect with this. I've never actually thought about just taking a moment to sort of write that down.
Yeah, it's great. I highly recommend it. And you'll notice, if you start doing it, you will absolutely notice like, what are the themes in media that jump out at me? Because like when I go through it, I'm like, oh wow, I wrote down like every quote about, like I write down every even halfway poetic line about red flowers. Like it's really bizarre.
Yeah.
So you'll really start to notice the things that catch your attention, which can be interesting for a lot of reasons.
I think actually, funny enough, this is purely anecdotal, but I was running some games for Gen Con. And there was a moment where I was explaining something about these set of zombies, and one of the players was like, wow, that was really, really poetic. Could you repeat that? And I was like, what did I say? It was.
Can you tell me so I can write it down?
Yeah, it came out of my mouth. I was like, was it good? I honestly, I don't even know. And it was. Like,
oh my god.
Yeah, it is weird how the brain works, and like in those sort of like improv moments, and to be almost like on the receiving end of that, to be like writing like, that was really, I really want to write that down. Like, could you say that again? It's like, no, it's gone.
It's gone. That's in the void now.
Yeah, you have to be within the moment of that experience. You can only get that combination of words once, and then it's gone. No, interesting. And then is there like, I take it, is there much of like a, like when you're flipping back through your sort of like inspiration journal, is there like what makes it through the chop, as I say, the chopping board, the cutting process, or like yeah, like how is the case of looking through those going around like, okay, well, this is one that I can definitely turn into, of like, this one is like, oh, there's another red flowers one.
I think typically it's when I start to see things that my brain starts to make those connections, you know, like it's the very similar idea to the RPG Writers Workshop, where one of the first things they encourage the writers to do is to create a mood board with images, right? I always love when they like hit that week in the course and all these people on social media just start like posting their mood boards. It's so cool.
Yeah.
But going through and being like, okay, this is a great quote about the study of daddy long legs that I read in like an academic text. And this is a great quote about climate change. And these are some like themes that have been popping up into my dreams. And you just sort of like start to draw lines through these things and think, okay, well, like, what if I combine these ideas into something that is like a remixed, new, original, my own thing? And so, yeah, I usually will just sit down, I'll pick a chunk of one of them, because I have like, at this point, like,
yeah,
a bunch of them.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'll just sit down, pick one of them or two of them, and just start flipping through. And if some ideas hit me, awesome. And if something doesn't, then sometimes I need to sit down and really think like, okay, I've really been doing a lot of this recently. I really want to try to do an adventure now. So what are some adventure themes that would be interesting to me? And then trying to use that to pull me through the inspiration journals.
No, it's interesting to sort of almost treat them as like, I guess, yeah, like strands to connect, and sort of like using multiple to kind of form like a fully fledged idea. And I think there are definitely moments when like I'm writing something and I'm like, I know I've written a note somewhere in a file somewhere that would be useful to sort of go back. And it's weird how like your memory kind of sparks in those weird ways, to sort of like in the middle of another project, you're just like, oh yeah, no, you've thought about something tangential to this that might be useful. And it sort of like spirals from there.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And I think the classic thing that every creator has experienced is of any kind is when you're working on one project and then you just have an idea for another project, and you have to either you let yourself fall completely into that depraved temptation to start something new while you're working on something old, or you have to like carefully encapsulate that in a little crystal ball and put it aside while you ravenously finish what you're working on so you can move on to the new thing you're excited for. Absolutely.
It is very much like you can feel it as you're typing. You feel like the sort of like the part of your brain just sort of expanding as more and more like your brain is thinking, oh, I could do this or this with this new project, and it's like, no, I need brain power right now on this, please. I need just a little. I just need a little bit more. And welcome back. Keep it.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. So moving on a little bit then, to talk about like, are there any particular parts of like your creative process that you enjoy the most? So like, what is your favorite part?
I think, to no one's surprise, my favorite part is when I finally get to build all the monsters that I highlighted in bold all throughout whatever I'm working on. But I also really I tend to, especially in my beast series, do like a short little like flavorful like quote from an NPC or a fictional character or whatever at the start of my beast series, and I really like writing that, just like really short little paragraph that sort of summarizes a lot of like what's interesting or unique about that adventure or that bestiary or whatever. I really enjoy doing that. And then sort of the final touches I actually enjoy sort of like going back through and like finding my mistakes and trying to revise them. Yeah, so I guess just stat blocks and like the introduction are like two of my favorite things.
Yeah, no, I know. I had to agree. The sort of rare opportunities where you get to like write in like a character's voice, or you just get that sort of like moment to get like some personality in. That's what I've in a few projects I've kind of like done the thing where just like randomly in the layout you just have like a quote from someone about something, where if it's about a landscape or like a it just yeah.
Oh yeah,
Like,
it's so much fun. Like for Scientific Secrets of Avernus, I thought it would be really cool to have notes from the same cartographer who writes notes about the locations throughout the campaign. So for some of the monsters, especially those where there was a little extra space after the first draft of the layout, I wrote up just like one or two sentences in the voice of that cartographer, and it was so much fun. These like sort of derisive, slightly offbeat comments from this unseen NPC. That I just really enjoy doing. So I think writing in a character's voice is always a lot of fun.
so I almost like a tangential question in that obviously in having written so many sort of stat blocks and creatures as a whole, like what are some things that you look out for to kind of make a creature interesting or make it sort of pop?
That's a great question. I think something that I have become, this maybe was not as true when I was first starting out and trying to figure out what about a monster design was interesting to me. But most monsters are only going to last a couple of rounds, especially if you are truly just going to fight them. If they're really just there to provide a combat obstacle, you want them to be able to do something neat in those 2 or 3 rounds. And I think some of my like easy tricks that I like to do are I give them some sort of interesting reaction that triggers when they're reduced to have hit points, when they take an attack, give them some sort of add some sort of role-playing element to like a combat ability. Recently I have started statting up monsters from the Silent Hill game franchise, which is a horror game, and there was one of these monsters that I was converting, and it has this aura effect that can make creatures afraid of it. And I was like, okay, that's all right? That's fine.
Yeah.
But I wanted something to add just a tiny pinch more flavor. And so I added, if you fail the saving throw by 5 or more, then that character starts sobbing uncontrollably and they don't know why. So injecting little elements like that, that add a story aspect to what is otherwise just like crunchy mechanics, like I'm gonna roll these dice to hit this thing and it's a bag of hit points.
Yeah.
So stuff like that, like interesting reactions, role-playing elements, and just a powerful ability you can use once or twice, something really cool that the players won't see coming is always really fun.
No, those are all three, they're all really good for like little tidbits of advice. I do like the idea of like almost treating it like a multi-tiered boss fight. Of like the idea of like, oh, when you reduce 50, like under 50%, this cool stuff happens. That kind of always keeps people like on the edge of their toes. Yes.
Yeah, keeping combat so dynamic, and like that is something that I'm so excited for about the Theros book. I'm probably not going to run anything in Theros, but the mythic actions almost act as like a 2-stage boss fight, and that's something that I did in Pretty Little Liches. So I was so excited to see like actual official mechanics that sort of give me an opportunity to do something that I really like to do already, and do it in a way that like is sort of officially recognized, instead of I think I write notes in the first Pretty Little Liches adventure that when this Medusa Lich realizes that she is up against no joke, that the party is like serious about taking her out, she uses a legendary action to shape change into an ancient green dragon. And I said, I gave her the ability that because she is a lich, she's been doing this for eons, she's been a druid for hundreds of years, she doesn't need to maintain concentration on shape change. She just stays an ancient dragon until she's knocked out. So it's really fun to create those like sort of cinematic moments of like when the battle shifts. And that's something that's really, that is something I'm really interested in creating, especially a boss fight,
No, I must admit, and I think especially I'm trying to think of like some of the more interesting creatures that like I've had characters run into, but there's like I think one of them like Zorbo, like they're the little creatures from the Tomb of Annihilation that like they get stronger based on where they are, or they like eat or they sort of like consume magic in a way. Small things like that, like even though they're like very weak creatures, like running into like a party of those, or like I'm trying to think of what the collective of Zorbo. Zolbus. the, just
Sorry, what was your question?
I must admit I was just rambling. I don't know if there necessarily was a question there. it was just I'm trying to think of like the interesting encounters or creatures that I've run into. Yeah. So my next question is so we asked about your favorite part of a project. Do you have a least favorite part as well?
Oh, That's a great question. This is the one that I really struggled with thinking about because I think that there is always, I don't know that necessarily it's super consistent when it is for me, but I always hit a wall on a project where there's like a lot more work to be done and I just want it to be over. Sometimes I'm still writing the first draft and I'm just like, oh, I hate this. I just want it to be done. Sometimes I am, just going through revisions and realizing that some things really need to make like big changes on to make sure that they are like looking good and tight. But I don't know. I don't think it's really necessarily a consistent point of the project for me, but I hit it with almost everything except for super short projects where I just hit a wall and I just need to step away and take a deep breath and try to get past that mental wall.
Does it connect at all to like anytime that you start coming up with other projects you kind of want to work on?
Ooh, that is a great question. Maybe I need to do a little bit of soul searching about that. I think that probably it's almost definitely a part of it, right? Like when you're working on something and something else you're super excited for gets started, and all you want to do is just go over to that other idea or that other project. I think that could definitely be a big role in it. I'm gonna have to start tracking.
The grass is always greener effect and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
No, okay. Well, then I guess moving like to shift the question then is like, are there any like over the course, like, you mentioned that you've been, creating on the DMsGuild for about a year now or so, or longer?
I think I released my first supplement in March of 2018.
And what was your first supplement?
Oh, geez. It is the Mistwood Bestiary and Treasure Trove, and it is basically I think it was like a handful of monsters and magic items and random encounters that I'd put together for a location called the Mistwood in the homebrew setting for my Dungeons and Turtles campaign way back when we first started. And I had created all this content and I was like, oh, I should share this. So it's pay what you want. I made it on Homebrewery, used all DMsGuild creator resource art. And then after a year, I actually came back to it. I pulled those monsters and I made what I call the complete Mistwood Bestiary, where I fleshed it out so where you can get 30 sort of Feywild themed monsters for a Sylvan forest. That is sort of like my version of being like, look how much I've improved this year.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love the idea of like taking something that you kind of put out there and then giving it that sort of like that year's worth of, or that all your experience kind of going back into it and seeing the improvement. It's that case of like every time like Craven Hall, which was like my first adventure, every time I sort of skim past
God, I love Craven Hall.
I'm always like, oh, this is I've changed, I've grown. This is and it can almost be hard to resist the urge to like, well, I could like spend like a week or so and sort of revamp it, and then next thing you know, every year it's like the Craven Hall 2019 edition, the 2020 edition.
Oh God, you definitely don't want to go down that road.
Yeah,
or maybe you do. I don't know. I know I don't.
But no, awesome. Like, yeah, the idea of so I guess the question is like, would you ever think about going back to like the completist Mistwood Bestiary or the complete?
If something really strikes me, and I really think that I have come up with a collection of new additional monsters that would fit in that setting, maybe I would release something else that like the title is tied to it or thematically they're connected. But I don't think I would need to do like an upgrade to the upgrade.
Yeah.
I left up the original Mistwood Bestiary and Treasure Trove. It's like 8 monsters and like 15 magic items and 20 random encounters for pay what you want. Yeah. And then if people like that and they like those monsters, then they can get the complete Mistwood Bestiary for a couple of bucks.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I would then do, the complete guide to the Mistwood setting guide and adventures and stuff. I just,
I think with it,
I don't think it's going to happen.
It's almost turning like project names into like Photoshop like project files, or like underscore version 3 underscore finished complete final version.
When you download that file and it says like V 4.7, and you're like, oh wow,
well,
they're coming back to this gig a couple of times.
So, like, almost not to summarize your whole experience then, but like, what are like some of the core lessons that you've kind of picked up along the way and that you kind of wish you'd learned earlier?
So I think there's the obvious lesson, right, that like almost everyone says, which is get an editor.
Hey, dude, I need like a bell. I can just like
exactly. But I think I'm going to try to go a little bit further than that, because I think an assumption, especially that a lot of new creators make, is that you give your editor like this filthy, dirty plate, and that they are going to clean it and polish it up for you, right? I think that's what, I mean, I know at least personally, that's what I just sort of assumed my first time when I had an editor. Mm-hmm. And I had the fabulous luck of working with Leon Beryllian, who they are a phenomenal creator, an amazing editor. And they very politely and very kindly were like, this still needs a lot of work. So maybe you want to go through and polish it before you pass it along to me for editing. And I think that's the moment I realized, like, oh my God, like, you don't just pass along like your first whatever draft. In order really for your editor and you to get the best work, you want to go through and you want to be happy about what you're passing on, because then they can really polish and improve that and give you good suggestions for how to really make that content better. And not just, there's so many errors here that like just correcting for the style guide alone, takes them a bunch of time. So I think that, like passing on a completed first draft of a project to your editor is really important, so that you can get the best out of the editing and so that they don't have to slog through all of the common mistakes, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's like a it's a team project, and it's the idea of like I try to treat an editor like I would like a metalsmith, and the fact that they can only forge with with the material you give them. And obviously it's if it comes up with like a dagger that snaps in half easily, well then that's what you provided them with. I think
that's a great, if we're gonna go for that full fantasy metaphor, that's great. I think that is perfect.
Yeah, and again, it's interesting again having the privilege to work with like a wide variety of editors. It's really interesting again to sit with that smithing analogy of like how they work with the material and what their kind of like strength is. And the ones that will sort of like come back and say, okay, well, I need this, I need you to do this, or the other ones that go, okay, well, we've it's curved now. We now have a curved blade. It wasn't intended, but now through the magic that I've done, we've kind of brought things together. I don't know if the analogy is holding up as well anymore. I don't know if I should abandon it.
We're gonna cruise on. We're just it sounds great. We're just gonna cruise past it.
It's the idea of like, if that analogy sounds good, please use it. If not, but no. I guess to pivot. So aside from like obviously the work process or the pipeline to handing off a project to an editor. Is there anything particularly about like maybe like monster creating or adventure writing that you kind of picked up as you went along?
So I think with adventure writing, I think thinking about your adventure as not a like start to an end like trail or path, but making sure that PCs have an opportunity to change the outcome is really important. And I know that can be really hard to implement, and we could probably talk for an hour about ways to make sure that an adventure is dynamic enough that PCs can change things, and et cetera, et cetera. And also giving the DMs tools to do that, to riff off of what you have and create something new and unique for their table. That's something that I think is really important. In Pretty Little Liches, I give random encounters for the locations before you reach the dungeon where each lich's lair is. And all of those random encounters have like tiny little story hooks embedded in them that I have like pretty explicit notes about, like, DMs can choose to completely ignore this or integrate this, and maybe this becomes an interesting part of your version of this story. Like, for example, there is an occasion where they come across this dreaming clam monster that if they wake it up, it attacks them. And if it is killed, then it reveals there's a naiad sleeping inside who's been asleep for thousands of years. And she will say that, I think I can resurrect this dead god that can help you if you think you can help me. And if DMs, and I don't say anything else about it, like there's no rules for the dead god or whatever, but DMs can choose to integrate that if that's something that catches their interest or not.
Mm-hmm. No, 100%. I love random encounter tables, but nothing necessarily like I want random encounter tables that are just like 3 goblins. I want them gone. Random encounters, like they have so much potential to have like interesting sort of like beats that's just sort of like flesh out the world. I quite like rather than in some stuff I've been writing like rumor tables or like gossip, and it essentially it's like another sort of like facet of random encounters that just can sometimes poke the party in the right direction. I think there's a product that I'm involved in which was I think I had to write, I think it was like 150 encounters.
Wow. Was this Fallen Camelot?
No. This I don't know if this has been announced yet, but but writing 150 of like it was really sort of eye-opening for me in the sense that like you can take you can create the most basic creatures that obviously in some, if you're writing your own product, you can take those creatures, fiddle with the stat block a little bit and just make that encounter innately interesting. But if you don't have the flexibility to make some of these things, it's like, I think what I have spoken about the goblin stack is the idea that you come across like, instead of just goblins, you come across a bunch of like 2 stacks of goblins wrestling. Right. Yeah, it's like just the nature of stumbling across that. It's like it's not instantly a combat encounter that it just can be solved with like pop in. It's like it's a mystery, or it's it's just something that kind of perks the interest. And in some cases, they can be comical. I know that some people kind of prefer to play it quite seriously. But yeah, you can play around. I think every now and then it's nice to have like a little bit of levity, or like just to sort of like spice things up. And I do love to almost bring it full around. I do love the sort of like tangential sort of story hooks that you just give the DM free rein, because at the end of the day, it's like what you write and what you put in an adventure is up to the DM's discretion. I mean, they can go with whatever they want with it.
Right, and
they should. No, 100%. And sometimes it's good to know as a designer or creator to be like, I'm gonna let go. This is all you. Like, take the wheel, and just let them sort of run with it.
Absolutely. There's nothing, I mean, this is true of like every DMsGuild creator I've ever talked to. There's nothing we love more than hearing how whatever we came up with first, our adventure or whatever, how that unfolds at somebody else's table is always so much more interesting and so much more particular to that group than what we put down on the page. Like, that's just the matter of fact. And it's so rewarding to hear how DMs take what we build and they create these amazing stories at their table with their players. So
building from that, I want to ask: Have you heard many stories of like some of your monsters like clashing up against parties?
I've had the great blessing to actually get to see several of my adventures on streams. So one of my adventures, Dark Waters, was streamed by the group, was used in a stream by the group Roll for Trouble, which was especially cool because they had this like really distinctive arc, and so the DM. Andy Black, she took the adventure and she tweaked things and she pulled some different things apart and she removed one magic item and replaced it with another in order to fit it into the arc of her story, which to me was like the greatest honor ever, right? Like, to have your adventure be an essential piece of somebody else's like big campaign arc is so cool. And I've also seen a few of my adventures played out at Midgardia, the Pretty Little Lich's adventures, which is so fun to watch, like tier 4 PCs go smashing up against these really interesting, or at least to me, really fun adventures that I built. And I play tested them, but obviously I'm going to run them pretty close to the way that I wrote them, right? Yeah. So to see Hikaru run them in their own way is
Yeah.
so fun and rewarding.
No, yeah, like that. So there's been a few times where I've heard people play some of my adventures, but again, I'd probably have to go out and search to see if anyone's done anything live with them. But that again, to have like your adventure be like a piece of history in this character's,
it's so cool.
Yeah.
Like that's literally amazing. Like how rewarding is that?
No, awesome. And then I guess so. As we're kind of talking about the sort of tabletop RPG as a whole, or sort of we're reaching outward. Is there anyone like in particular in the DMsGuild community that kind of inspires you?
Yes, there are several. Of course, right? We all have those like people who, we follow all of their work like so keenly. I've got a couple of people I want to shout out. First, I've already mentioned them, but Leon is amazing. They create these, they tweet about the adventures and the campaigns that they run, both professionally and personally, which I've stolen things from those tweets many a time. They do fantastic blog posts. They've written fantastic adventures. Hair of the Dog is so much fun, and it's so hard to pull off like this sort of mystery, almost heist-ish sort of adventure in D&D. Like D&D is really built like with these combat crunch, and so to be able to pull that off is so cool, and I respect them so much, and I love working with them. But also, I love, I buy everything written by Core Artificer and illustrated by Sticky Hunter. I love their interpretation of a lot of sort of Magic the Gathering things and Ravnica and all these other settings that Core has sort of posted on Tumblr. I'll just take and use everything. Like it's just so much fun, and they do such a good job, and everything is amazing and so ridiculously well priced. It's like it literally feels like a highway robbery whenever I buy anything. So love them. And there are lots of other creators. I mean, obviously we could go on forever, but I also really love Kat Evans. She really touches on like horror in a lot of her work in a way that I sort of like aspire to. And also she has been involved in Trophy Dark, which is an RPG that I'm looking to try to explore because it's so cool.
Nice. No. Also, again, it's I love that question. It warms my cold heart. And then I guess so. You kind of mentioned the sort of like dipping into like other like RPG systems, but do you have like a particular like dream project or like something that's kind of like always like off in the distance that you kind of?
Yeah, definitely. There's two sort of dream projects that like are just like really out there. One is I would love to get together a group of creators of color and queer creators to remake the Elder Evils for 5e, like the Elder Evils of the Forgotten Realms. Just because, like that sort of cosmic horror, mind-bending, weird body horror, absolute nonsense and tomfoolery is like so my jam, and I would just love to see what creators of color and other queer creators can do with that material, because a lot of it is based in a lot of prejudice, and so taking that and twisting it and turning it into something that we can build ourselves would be just so cool. And that's sort of like the dream sort of D&D collab that like I would love to make happen, but Lord only knows. Right now I've spoken into the universe, so curses on my head.
Yeah, you gotta put that energy out there. I suppose there's probably some like something about speaking about, was it the Elder Evils? That is probably not the most
before I started what?
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
we good? I think we had a...
I think so. Sorry, that was my internet.
No, of course. Sorry, you were saying?
Before I started creating for the DMsGuild, my creative outlet was screenwriting. And I wrote a 13-episode supernatural drama, like set in a real-world setting. And it would be so cool to port that into 13 like Monster of the Week episodes, or I forget what the term they use is instead of adventures, but it would be really cool to sort of port that into Monster of the Week. But I haven't played Monster of the Week yet. I haven't even finished reading the rule book. Classic, like, you know, that PDF is like sitting somewhere deep in my drive, and I like, you know. So that is definitely something I would be super interested in doing, just because I think it could be really fun and personally fulfilling, even though, you know, maybe it wouldn't be so well.
Well, no, I mean, I like the idea of like, you know, taking like the other creative facets of your life and then sort of like, you know, merging them, combining them, you know, they're stronger together and all that. No, that's awesome. Yeah, again, kudos for, again, I can't imagine the work that goes into writing not one episode, but 13 screenplays, essentially.
Yeah, it's a page per minute, so they're all like around 45 pages.
Gee, wow, that's impressive. So coming to screens near you in 2025, is that?
No. Definitely not. But it was definitely fun, and you know, plays to a lot of the things that I like. So it was just a project of joy. And sometimes it's nice to just like sit down and do something that like really just makes you smile and laugh at yourself. And
100%. No, like I said, that's kind of why we create. It's an outlet, you know. You gotta get out there.
Exactly.
Speaking of, okay, I guess to adjust our lenses to a little bit more immediately. Again, I don't know what's with me in bad analogies today. I'm just
the lens is focused. The microscope. We're ready.
What are you currently working on, or you know, what are you happy to disclose that you're working on?
Sure. I have been working on. I'm allowed to say this now, I think, because we've been advertising. The Odyssey core artificer and Sticky Hunter sort of headed this huge Theros Odyssey anthology of different islands. I'm going to be in all 3 volumes. I'm extremely excited for all 3. People have brought just some absolutely gonzo bananas content to the table, and I'm ready to feast. Let me tell you, just feast. So I'm really excited for those to come out. There's not a lot of Theros like adventure content on the Guild yet, and I mean, the art is amazing, the layout is amazing, and the adventures are so cool. I'm just really excited to see what people think of it. So that's one thing that's going to start coming out pretty soon. I believe, I shouldn't say, actually, I don't know.
Yeah, soon TM. It's, you know,
soon TM, exactly. And then I'm also working on Scientific Secrets of Icewind Dale. I've gone through all the first drafts, and the monsters in this volume are really something else. People dug deep for some crazy stuff, some really wild stuff. And I'm really excited for that to come out. I've already started using some of the monsters at my own table.
Really? It's like, it's too good. I can't wait. I need it. I
can't wait. I literally, especially since one of my players is going to DM the next campaign at level 20. Ooh. So she was like, has started reading like the monster manual and Tomb of Annihilation, which she's going to run. And she's like, you know, it's really making me think about these things that you make. They're really too much. They're just a lot.
I think that's a compliment. I think
yeah, exactly. I was like, well, this time wasn't me. It was, you can look at these 4 other people who did it for me.
And what's the plan for that? Is to release just before the Rime of Icewind Dale or just after?
I actually think we're going to go for a day of release.
Ooh.
Which I have no idea how that's going to go. You know, report back later, I guess. But yeah, we'll see. I think we'll probably be ready long before then. So I haven't entirely decided. I might reach out to Lisa and just try to pick her brain if she has a second to see, like, if there would be an advantage to going earlier on the day.
I think, what is it? Again, don't quote me, in just sort of surveying like the sort of like Twitters and like the Discord rants that happen, I think it turns out like on release, it seems to be there's a dip in sales because most people are already buying the actual book rather than they're not really looking for supplemental things just yet. But don't quote me on that. Again, yours may be the runaway, you know, example or the.
I don't count anything as a runaway.
But no, honestly, best of luck for the release of that. I'm looking forward to it. Again, the Scientific Secrets of is a very, it's an exciting series. It's always got something interesting, and there's always something in the back of your head that's just like, this exists in the real world somewhere, doesn't it?
Yes. Oh my God, absolutely. It's so much fun to create, and I highly recommend. If anyone's going to check out anything I made, you know, I could tell them like, go check out the thing that I will actually get all the royalties for. But the Scientific Secrets is like actually what I would point people at, because I might get like 2% of the royalties on that MFR, but it is so slick and so cool, and there's just so much good stuff in there. You can't stay away. And it's like the price of a Starbucks coffee, which is overpriced for Starbucks coffee, but not for all these monsters.
Yeah.
So
and you get just as much sustenance of the soul
exactly.
rather than of the physical
sustenance to torture your players with. And then on top of that, I am, not to go on and on, I'm also writing the DM's Guide to Travel, which I ran a lot of different travel in a lot of different ways over the course of my 1 to 20 campaign. And so I'm sort of collecting all of those different methods together, because running travel can be really tricky depending on what your table wants and what you as a DM want to try. And so basically in that, I'm going to lay out, I think it's 8 or maybe it'll be 10, between 8 and 10 different ways that DMs can try running travel to see what works for them in their table, or maybe just give them ideas for ways that they can tweak the way they already run travel if they really like it. So that's something I'm really excited for. And I'm also working on a level 1 to 20 campaign that is set entirely in Neverwinter. I have reached a point where I'm not sure if I'm going to try to file off serial numbers and move to drive-through RPG or what I'm going to do, just because things have WotC has not satisfied me in terms of the way that they've treated creators of color, particularly Orion, and the way that they also handled Oliver Clegg's art situation recently. I've not been satisfied with. So we're going to see what I do with that. Who knows? Maybe it'll be Everwinter. But yeah, a level 1 to 20 campaign that I'm excited for. It's going to be very weird, very eldritch. So it'll be a lot of fun.
The impressive enough to go through an entire 1 to 20 campaign, writing that for that's going to be a beefy document. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I was very inspired by James Introcaso and John For's The Demon Plague, which I'm running right now. And I love it because it is such a tight, compact level 1 to 20 adventure that it feels like I will actually be able to run it in a reasonable amount of time. And so that's something that I think I'm gonna try to emulate to make it tight and fun and dynamic and not take 7 years.
Yeah. No, that's obviously the Everwinter. I'm trying to think of another sort of parrot. You hit it right the first time. The
Everwinter. Yeah.
I realize that's a word that I just can't say. It's like my brain doesn't have the ability to. So I could sit here and try for the next hour or so, but I think I'll just cut my losses and just say that's a word.
No worries. It's off the cuff. It's all good.
Yeah. No, but no, awesome. No, and yeah, with some of them coming out more recently, is there like a rough ETA on the 10 types of travel, or is it?
Yeah, that's tricky because that's been the project that I sort of pick up when I have time and then put down. So I'm not really sure. I think I'm definitely going to get it out this year, but I really don't know. It's sort of been my on and off project. Oh, and I do have. I'm having a new field guide coming out with 10 non-humanoid angels, and that'll be out before the summer is out. So that's going to be really cool, and I'm excited for that. Get some really weird angels out there. None of this humanoid nonsense. We want tentacles. We want eyes everywhere. We want flaming halos. Come on, get out of here.
We've had enough humanoids.
Exactly.
It's time for the dogs to have a go.
Exactly. It's time for the Bible seraphim to have its day. He deserves it.
well, Zeke, I think we are getting to the end of our allotted hour. Thank you so much for being my guest. It's been a blast. I've learned something. I'm gonna run into some stat blocks I have in the works, and I'm gonna probably tear them apart in a good way, in the best of ways.
Excellent. So happy to hear it.
But if people are curious to hear about all the work that you've got going on, what are some of the best ways that they can sort of stay up to date?
Well, I'm moderately active on Twitter, at Fantasy Ecology, which sort of summarizes what I do pretty well.
Nice.
And I don't know when this will be coming out, but I am setting up a listserv pretty soon that will just send out every once in a while some discounts. When you first sign up, you're going to get a free product with 8 monsters of CR22 or higher. And yeah, it's going to... That will be out there at some point. I've said it now, so it has to happen.
Today is roughly the 13th.
So that'll be coming out pretty soon. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Perfect.
And yeah, those are the main ways of reaching me. I love talking to people about their games and hearing what other people are doing, even if it has nothing to do with my stuff. So feel free to hit me up on Twitter and tell me about your games, your campaigns, what you're working on. I love to hear it.
No, awesome. Yeah, yeah. There's not enough people talking about the Dungeons and Dragons on Twitter or their games. So let's just throw it all your direction, and then we can all everyone else on Twitter can just like scroll through your feed and be like, that's good. It's still going.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like there's this level of like, I think people perceive this like level of narcissism with like talking about their own game or like talking about like what they're doing at their table. But I love hearing about it. And so I just wish more people do it. I try to do it every once in a while without being, over the top. But, I like to post a little tweet now and again about like what my players and my different games are up to. And I love seeing that from other people and asking them questions about how they handle certain stuff. So yeah, I'd love to see more of that. So hit me up with that anytime.
Yeah. Nice. Well, yet again, Zeke, thank you so much for your time. This has been a blast. I've been Matthew Whitby. You can find me at Whitby Writes, where sometimes I write things. I think I should have a product coming out soon. I don't know. Just
special surprise inside.
Yeah, we'll find out together. But my very last question for you: how do you end a podcast?
I thought about this for a long time, and I think the best way might be to just eat the camera.
Just eat the camera. I mean, this is
the camera.
This is. Well, it's been nice knowing you guys, and just.
Here I go.